Welcome to another episode of Course Heading. In this week's episode, obviously, we're going to be talking about the newest episode of Lower Decks. Just a quick discussion, but before we get into that discussion, how you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing really well. Excited to talk about this week's episode. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited to talk about some Star Trek this lovely morning. I think we should just jump right into it. We do not have like a segment before the discussion. This is just a fresh, raw reaction, semi-raw reaction because we're recording this after the fact, a little bit after the episode has aired, which is good, but it's also course setting helps me work out how I actually feel about the episode and work through things that didn't go that I didn't thoroughly really enjoy, but then there's other stuff that I like to talk about that I really absolutely loved in this episode, so I'm sure that'll be refined as we talk about the episode. So
couldn't agree more. It's definitely become, since we've been doing this, it's become like a really important component to me, like settling in my own thoughts on where the episode sort of stands in my own hierarchy of what's great and what's good and what's average and maybe what's a little below. Just being able to talk about it with somebody and bounce some ideas off.
Yeah, I think we should just get right into it.
Let's do it.
Bill, what did you think of the episode?
I thought it was pretty good. I wouldn't say it was as good as last week's. I thought it was. I think it did a lot of what I like Lower Decks doing. It was operating in the space that I think Lower Decks is best in. I think my favorite thing in this episode was the Boimler trying to figure out the kind of person he wants to be, the kind of officer he wants to be, kind of career he's going to want to have. Like, to me, like the most appealing aspect of the Lower Decks premise is that we're dealing with people who have not figured it out yet, that haven't arrived and aren't like
established officers,
fully fleshed out, completely established officers well into their careers. These are people who are fresh into it, have not figured all those things out yet, are still very much in the developmental phase of becoming the elite Starfleet officers. And Boimler is a really good window into that process. And this episode, I think, gave us some really cool stuff with discovering, the way to handle that, and the right and the wrong way to try to achieve, taking that next step into the career and becoming a leader. And this is a guy who clearly wants to advance and go up into the ranks and maybe be a captain someday. And that those lessons are going to be really important. And we're getting to watch him take those lumps and make mistakes and see the right and the wrong way to go about it. And I did enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of my favorite thing with the episode as well. I think in Star Trek we always see these types of these groups like Red Squad or like things in Deep Space Nine as well, where it's like these elite level command kind of career-esque fast track officers. So I think to me that was super Star Trek as well because we've seen that before. But yeah, I think you're right. The best thing about this episode is it's just Boimler working through what type of officer, what type of person, what type of crewman he wants to be, and he has this sudden great realization that he doesn't want to be that, and I think that was cool to see. So yeah, that's that aspect of the episode I really did.
And I think. Yeah, I think the lessons about the kind of leader that's ultimately going to be successful is, well played. Like I feel like it's accurate. I think it there's a lot there that people can take away from in just general professional life. Just mimicking the surface level stuff you see from 10,000 feet away from somebody like Riker is not like those red shirt officers have no clue like about what actually makes Riker a good officer, a good leader, a good captain. They see the very basic outline of who he is, and I think Boimler discovering that there's so much more substance to having that those traits, and the things that those guys think make Riker a good leader are not actually that helpful. The friendship and the group dynamics are what Boimler I think gravitates most to, and we know because we watched The Next Generation, we know Riker pretty well. Those are the things that drive Riker and probably are the most useful to Riker as well. So I think that's a really well calibrated lesson, and I think they do a good job of exploring it in the show.
Yeah,
and in this episode.
And it just made me think it's Riker wasn't like that. He wasn't like he's arrived. Like he did not. I mean, a little bit different, but he would go on away missions and get his hands dirty. And there's stories of him on other ships and things. Like he actually did. Was this type of officer, not one of those ones that's like, oh, I've arrived already, and all I do is just give these, which is a very kind of funny way to describe it, but just give these speeches and things like that. So it's just it's hard to see the whole picture. I think like this group just sees this really just this icon almost as Riker and how he's already arrived, but there's a difference. When you're just fresh in Starfleet, you're not just already arrived and going to be a captain right away. So, it was just that part of the episode I really did enjoy.
Yeah. The red shirts think it's all about the appearance, what you look like, how you carry yourself, the speeches that you give. There's kind of like empty gesture, kinds of things are what make you a good leader. But I think as we see Boimler discover, it's really about how well do you know your people, and like how well do you connect with the folks you work with, and can you use those connections to solve problems and work together, and bring people together to create a more whole unit. Like those are the kinds of things that make a good leader. And like I said, Lower Decks is so well equipped to explore those kinds of things because it's the Lower Decks. It's these young officers that haven't figured all these things out yet. I'm glad that I always like it when they actually explore those things and make it the focus of an episode. And I think at least half the episode is about that, and I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah. The other half of the episode is, I think, well, there's a couple different things. The other half of the Lower Deck crew are dealing with basically trash duty, going around to the senior officer quarters and their labs and their workspaces and kind of cleaning up their stuff that they're not using anymore, and all kinds of shenanigans ensue from those adventures, which is certainly, I think, the most outwardly comedic, like flexing the funny muscles part of the episode. And then on top of that, we have the bridge crew trying to broker a ceasefire with Pakleds, and Captain Freeman and Shaxx beaming down to deal with the Pakled leadership, which is actually kind of cool to see. It's not something I expected to ever, just a few years ago, we go into the Pakled homeworld or Pakled planet to kind of get a little more insight into them. That's kind of cool that the show is really diving so deep into the Pakleds. So we have a couple. It's another one, like almost an A, B, and C story. And I liked all three of them. I think my favorite's certainly the Boimler story, but I also really like the bridge crew stuff and that classic framework of the outline of, we go to the Pakled planet to try to come up with a peace deal, and some defector tries to come up to the ship and ask for asylum and create all kinds of
classic Star Trek setup.
That's a TNG episode. Yeah, exactly. So that's and yet again, the outline and the framework of the episode story is so exactly Star Trek. and I love it when they do that. Like, I feel like that's a standard for Lower Decks. A lot of the episodes have that, but this one felt so comfortably like the Next Generation, especially with that Packlet storyline.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It just feels, and it fits, I guess, the time frame where the show is kind of set. But yeah, it just feels kind of like a warm blanket, like this type of story setup.
Yeah, it's another example. I think this season's doing a really good job with Captain Freeman. I think she's getting a lot of cool things to do, and I like the storyline with her really trying to put herself out there and advance her own, persona, and maybe try to move up in the world a little bit, become a captain of a little bit more prestigious ship. And this kind of a mission is definitely in line with that storyline.
I think the whole bridge crew itself has a good amount of stuff to do in this episode. I mean, we got the group down on the planet, but we've also got a pairing on the ship trying to broker this the defector. So yeah, I think you're totally right. It's a welcomed but I think they do a great balance, because they don't it doesn't feel like they're the main part of the episode. It's just like an addition to the kind of the main storyline with the Lower Deck crew. So yeah, I'm loving how they're using the bridge crew this season.
Agreed. And I think this episode also does a really nice job of like intertwining these different storylines. Like we get Ramsey and Kayshawn kind of roaming the corridors with the spy,
going to the gift shop,
and then going to the gift shop. But they pass the Lower Deckers doing their thing with the trash pickup, and like they do a good job of not keeping the storylines completely separate from each other. They overlap at appropriate times, I think, and just enough to keep it all cohesive and connected. And that's a tough, they have a lot going on in 25 minutes with these three storylines.
Yeah,
I think they did a good job of balancing it and giving all three of them room to breathe and their own personalities, and they all felt substantive enough to have left an impression. And I think that's a success of this episode for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. The pacing was it didn't feel like 25 minutes. I think they did a good job of not packing or shoehorning too much stuff into this episode, but it was also like, okay, this is, I mean, everything feels pretty well balanced, I would say.
Yeah. Agreed. Where do you think this one sort of fits now that we're like 6 in? Is this kind of upper tier, middle of the pack?
I think
down towards the bottom.
Least,
how do you feel about
this? I think this, for me, it feels mid-pack, and that's no slight to this episode. I think there's, I'm generally positive on this episode.
Me too.
But I just think that there's other better episodes in the season. And in the show, but this is not a slight to this episode.
That's cool.
Yeah, to me, some of the Packlet stuff, like I get it that they're not that intelligent in the way that they go. So that kind of feels a little bit. That's why this episode comes down a little bit for me, because I mean we get that the Packlets aren't, So, but yeah, I think for me why this episode is a little bit more generally positive is because of the classic TNG setup, but also with the classic Star Trek trope of this other group that's trying to fast track command. But it's also it also throws in a fun, simple setup that's kind of trademarked for Lower Decks, because like the trash pickup thing is like so Lower Decks to me. I think that's such a simple little thing that they do. So yeah, I think it has everything. I think just for me at this point in the season, maybe my view on this episode will change, but this Packlet stuff was just like, we get that they, so
yeah, I agree with that. I do think one of the risks with the Packlets is they can be a little one note. They're we get it. They're not outwardly intelligent. They're very memey. Like they're meme friendly, I guess would be the right term, with the silly lines, and they're perfectly, again, like kind of situated to live in the Lower Decks space. I think, because they lend themselves to humor and that kind of that kind of humor. But they do run the risk of, going a little one note. And there are times during this episode, I think, where that rears its head, and I do think that maybe holds it down a little bit for me as well. But I do think we're going to get more of them. I get the sense that this is going to be kind of like an ongoing, they're going to be an ongoing presence in at least this season and maybe beyond. That's just a guess. But I think that aside, I think it's pretty good. I think the humor is pretty fun here. Not every joke with the cleaning up the trash and not every incident that happens along that way is like laugh out loud for me. But I, like you said, that job, what they're doing, what they're asked to do is, again, like kind of goes back to the very beginning of the show. That's one of the things they leaned into right at the outset. Yeah. Like what kind of crappy jobs are they going to have to do, and what kind of duties do these crewmen get? And that was fun to explore and something new and fresh. And those characters are so comfortable with each other too now by this point that and just anytime we get them together in different pairings and different groups, it's always good. And I really don't have much negative to say. I think you nailed probably my one kind of reservation.
One gripe. I mean, if there's only one thing that I'm having an issue with, I think we could call it a successful episode for sure.
Yeah, I think it is. I really do. I think they found new things to do. I also feel like we talked about on last week's episode, that kind of felt like it almost put a bow on some of the lingering storylines from season one with Rutherford's kind of dealing with his identity and his memory and how he relates to Tendi, and then with Boimler and Mariner's friction with Boimler having left. This felt like the first episode of the second season that feels completely sort of moved forward from some of those kinds of hangups, and that's exciting. That it feels like the show is moving forward. Like there's a forward trajectory powering the show. We're kind of moving into some new territory, which is exciting.
Yeah, it put to bed a lot of season one stuff that I felt like it's fine if it can bleed over. I think that adds some great rewatchability to the show. But I'm excited as well. It does feel like we're kind of moving into fresh territory. Even the storylines with Bridge Crew and not just the lower deck side of things. So it's a good time.
The other thing with the Bridge Crew, I was really happy to see Kayshawn still around. That was kind of like an open question.
That was our question last week. Is he going to be, or 2 weeks ago, is he going to come back, so.
Yeah, with Shaq's back, the idea when he first appeared was kind of like he's the new security chief. And with Shaq's back on the scene, like what happened to Kayshawn. But thrilled that he's kind of hanging around and is still a character because I think there's a lot of potential to use him. So I guess he's going to be recurring. He'll be a security officer on the ship.
Yeah. And it seemed like, which I enjoyed, it seemed like the universal translator was working this week.
A little better.
Yeah, because I was worried that they were going to get too cute with that
agreed type
of stuff. But I'm glad that they kind of gave some room for that joke, because I think there's some great comedic potential with his character, but I don't want that to be his only identity, that one-dimensional aspect of the character. So
absolutely, you don't want it to become a one-note, obvious. That he's got to be more dynamic than that, and I think they're doing that, which is good to see. I was relieved by that it wasn't just a bunch of Darmok quotes. Because that's kind of lazy, and I'm glad they're not doing that.
And he's paired up differently. He's more on the Bridge Crew side of things, whereas the first episode he was kind of more on the lower deck side. So
with the lower decks guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's what I think. One really strong aspect of this season is they're doing very fresh and different pairings, and not feeling like they're the same every week and things like that. It feels nice with not just the lower deck crew. Obviously they've done a great job of different pairings on that side of things, but also with the Bridge Crew as well.
Bridge Crew, yeah, totally agreed. I think this is a good one. I definitely came into this conversation pretty positive on it, but I actually think I maybe would have said B- before this conversation. I might be a little bit more into the B territory.
Solid B, I think.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot with these conversations. Like I said, I kind of come in with maybe an idea of what I would label it. And sometimes I come away with the same thing, but definitely, at least half the time, I think I adjust my score just after being able to talk about it outwardly and hear what somebody else thought too.
That's our goal here with core setting, is to kind of refine that perspective and how we feel about the episode. Just a quick 25 minutes or so, which we're rapidly approaching. So hopefully this conversation helped you guys. It helped Bill and I for sure to kind of work through some things that we had to say about this episode. We'll be back next week to talk about, again, another episode of Lower Decks. It's I think we're trucking along. We're getting towards maybe the middle or back half of the.
We're past, We're gonna be on episode 7 of 10, so we're getting there. Almost
over the hill already.
Almost over already.
But yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about it. If you guys have any thoughts about the episode, Twitter and Discord are probably the best two places to keep the discussion going. With that being said, just want to thank everybody for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care.